Welcome. We're going to talk about 2.3 linear functions and slope. The first thing that we have is our basics of slope, right? Slope, the letter that's always used for slope is m. M is equal to rise over run. The reason why it's rise over run is because when you're talking about axes, your x-axis and your y-axis, when you rise, you would rise on your y-axis, and when you would run on your x-axis. The reason why we say rise over run is because we're so stuck on ordered pairs being x first and then y, x first then y, x first, and when you're graphing it's x first then y. But when you do the slope, your y's are in your numerator. So it is change in y's divided by your change in x's, and here's your slope formula. You do need to know your slope formula. Your slope formula will not be given to you on the test. Alright, we're going to use an example here of finding the slope of the line passing through the pair of points, or state that the slope is undefined. Then indicate whether the line through the points rises, falls, is horizontal, or is vertical. Alright, so my slope formula, m equals y sub 2, 1, minus y sub 1, which is 2, divided by x sub 2, 3, minus x sub 1. It's a negative 4, so I'm going to go ahead and write plus 4. So here I get that my slope is equal to negative 1/7, which means that my slope falls. Anytime I have a negative slope from left to right, it's falling. Alright, let's look at this next example here. So here I have m is equal to, once again, negative 2 minus, it's a negative 2, so I'm going to write plus 2, divided by 0 minus 4. So I get that my slope is equal to 0 divided by negative 4, which means that my slope is 0. So since my slope is 0, that is because it is a horizontal line. Going back here, just a little bit more information on this one. Going back and looking at my points, both of my y values are the same, and that's because if I were to write the equation of the line, it would be y equals negative 2. Alright, let's look at this last example here. We are going to find the slope of this line, m equals 5 minus, it's negative 1, so plus 1, divided by negative 3 minus, it's negative 3, so plus 3. So I get m is equal to 6 divided by 0, which means then that my slope is undefined. So since my slope is undefined, it does mean that it is a vertical line. Going back and looking here, look, I have my x's are now repeating, which means the equation of my line would be x equals negative 3. Some different ways of writing the equations. You have your point slope form. This is the form I use the most. Y minus y sub 1 equals m times x minus x sub 1. All you need is a point and the slope. If you're given 2 points first, you have to determine the slope, and then you use the slope and one of the given points. That just means you have a choice. It doesn't matter which point you use. You have your slope intercept form. That's when you solve the equation for y. M is the slope, b is the y-intercept. Y has to be by itself and it cannot be negative. We usually use this for graphing a line. Alright, here it says, use the given conditions to write an equation for each line in point slope form and slope intercept form. So when you're writing the equation of the line in point slope form, you need a point and the slope. All right, which in this first example, we have both of those. So writing it in point slope form, y minus, what's my y value? -2, so I'm going to write +2 equals my slope, -2, open my parentheses, x minus, and then what's my x value here? 3. All right, so there's my point slope form of my line. Now I need to write it in slope intercept form. So in order to write it in slope intercept form, I'm going to simplify that right side. So I have y plus 2 equals -2x, and then I get plus 6. All I'm doing is using this equation that's over here. But now I'm going to write it in slope intercept form, so I'm going to subtract 2 from both sides. So I have y equals -2x plus 4. This part right here is not going to change because that's where my slope is. All right, here I'm given 2 points. So I have first thing I have to do is I have to find my slope. So I'm going to find my slope first. M equals -1 minus 2 divided by 6 minus -3, so plus 3. So I have my slope is equal to -3 divided by 9. So I have my slope is equal to -1/3. All right, then once I have my slope, I choose a point. It doesn't matter which point that I choose. So the first way, remember that I need to write it is in a point slope form. So I'm going to pick my first point. It doesn't matter. MyMathLab will accept both. Y minus my first point here, 2 equals my slope, 1/3, open my parentheses, x minus, what's my x value? Plus 3, because it's negative. So here is my equation in point slope form. Now I need to write it in slope intercept form. So therefore I'm going to simplify over here, distribute there. So I have y minus 2 equals -1/3 x minus, I have a negative times a positive, so that's why I know I have my negative there. And then I have 1/3. I make 3 into a fraction 1, right? But I'm going to still just get 1 there. So now I'm going to add 2 to both sides. So I have y equals -1/3 x plus 1. Now, just so you know, if I were to have used the other point, so I'm just going to kind of move this up a little bit here, and I'm going to say, well, what if I would have used the other point? So let's say I would have done y minus, so plus 1 equals -1/3, open my parentheses, x minus 6. Now that's another equation of the same line, but now let's see what happens when I solve this for y. So I have y plus 1 equals -1/3 x, right? Negative times a negative is a positive. 1/3 times 6, I'm going to get 2. Subtract 1 from both sides. I still get y equals -1/3 x plus 1, which is what I got right up here. So it doesn't matter which ordered pair that you use, you will still get the correct answer. When you're graphing using your slope intercept form, you solve the equation for y, determine what your slope is, that's the coefficient of your x. What is the constant? That's your b. I always write it as an ordered pair. So you start by graphing your y-intercept, which is on your y-axis. From this point, you use the slope to find the next point. Now, when you're connecting the 2 points, don't just stop there. You have to make sure that you continue it in both directions. So say if I had a point here and a point here, I'm not just connecting those points. When I draw my line, I am connecting those points, but I'm making sure that I label it as a line. I will usually always do 3 points. You should make sure that your line is correct by using 3 points. All right, let's look at this example. We're going to rewrite the given equation in slope-intercept form and then graph the equation. All right, looking at this equation is in general form because it equals 0. My leading term is positive, and but we don't need any of that stuff when we're going to put it in slope-intercept form. We want to get it so that it reads y equals. So in order for me to get this term right here by itself, I need to subtract 2x from both sides and add 18 to both sides. So I have minus 2x and then plus 18 on both sides. So now that zeroes out, so I have 3y equals negative 2x plus 18. Now I need to get my y actually by itself, so I'm going to divide everything by 3. So I have y equals negative 2/3 x and then plus 6. All right, so now I know that my slope is negative 2/3 and my y-intercept is 6. So when I go to graph this equation, the first place I start on is my y-intercept right there. So I have my 6, and then from my 6, I'm going to go negative 2 down, and then positive 3. And that's what gives me that negative slope, negative 2, positive 3. I usually find a couple, I could also go positive 2 and then negative 3. Whoops, I didn't mean to put a dot over here. It's nice I have a little eraser here. All right, so now let's go ahead and graph my line here. Remember, when you're graphing a line, don't just connect the points. Make sure to go through it and make sure to show me that it's a line. All right, now let's look at one where my equation looks like this. Again, it's equal to 0, so the first thing I need to do, this time I don't have a y. I can't actually put this one in slope-intercept form, but I am going to go ahead and get this x by itself. So I'm going to go ahead and add 16 to both sides. So I have 8x is equal to 16. Divide both sides by 8. I get x is equal to 2. When I have x equals 2, then I know that my slope is undefined. There's no y-intercept that's here. So a common mistake that students make is they come over here and on the x they just put a point right there on where x equals 2, and then they think they're done. This is a line where my slope is undefined. That means that it doesn't matter what y is, x has to be 2. So therefore, like we talked about with slope, is that it is a vertical line. You have your vertical and horizontal lines. Your vertical line is x equals c. The slope is undefined, so you have to write that out a lot of times, or in other words, on MyMathLab, it's a choice. Y can be anything, but x does not change. Your horizontal line is y equals c. The slope is 0, so there's where your coefficient of x would be 0, but you don't see an x term at all. X can be anything, but y does not change. Most of the time, equations are given to you in standard form. You have all integer values, there are no fractions. In standard form, a must be positive, and a and b are both not 0. General form is just another way of writing the equation. I know in a couple questions in another section, it'll ask you to write it in general form. General form, no, again, no fractions. A is positive and your equation equals 0. Kind of like your standard form of an equation of a quadratic equation. It has to be equal to 0. Finding your linear intercepts. If you're looking for the x-intercept, you're plugging 0 into the function, okay, and then solving it. I always write them as ordered pairs. I think in MyMathLab, you're just plugging in whatever the x value is. If you're looking for the y-intercept, then you're plugging 0 into the function and solving it. Your ordered pair is then y, 0, comma, y. So again, on MyMathLab, I think you're just plugging in y, the actual value for y. Graph both points. Again, draw a line through both points. Remember, don't stop. Make sure to continue in both directions. Test your line. I always plug in another point just to make sure. If online it asks you to graph using your intercepts, that's the way you have to graph it. If you graph using, let's say, a point, the y-intercept, and then you maybe use your slope and it's not the other intercept, even though it's the same exact line, it will count it as wrong because you didn't use the actual intercepts to graph. So just keep that in mind.